He's so dangerous. Freddy Krueger has nightmares about him.
Hello and welcome to the Rugby Hive. I'm Dallen Stanford, and despite my South African accent, I was fortunate enough to play rugby for the United States on the Sevens World Series.
And I'm MacDowell, a former Canadian Sevens international. Back in my playing days, I went head-to-head against Dallen in the USA.
For several years, Robin has coached international sevens for various countries, including Canada and Mexico. He's massively passionate about growing the game across the Americas through his MacDowell rugby programs at all levels. I'm currently a commentator for World Rugby, most recently broadcasting the Rugby World Cup in Japan, as well as the amazing Sevens World Series.
More than a decade later, we are teaming up to bring you insights from legendary players and coaches from around the world.
All legends have a story. The Rugby Hive podcast is here to share it.
Welcome to the Hive.
Oh, he's more dangerous than climate change.
Today's guest enjoyed a professional rugby career that spanned 15 years, playing in 4 Rugby World Cups, becoming a world champion in 2014. Her stats include a record of 82 internationals for England, scoring over 200 points, and representing Great Britain at the 2016 Olympic Games. Here is English legend Nollie Waterman. Such a treat today to have the English sensation Nollie joining us. How are things going for you down that side?
Yeah, they're good actually. Surprisingly, the weather has been pretty nice for England, to be fair. And I'm really lucky and fortunate because we have a small garden at the back, and I've got a crazy Labrador that's keeping me very busy, but getting me out and about for some exercise every day, which is great. And
tell me, how did you get the name Nollie?
Well, yeah, people will be able to see on the screen. My official name is Danielle. It's not that great a story, actually, Dallen. Maybe you can help me come up with something a little bit better. But my brother called me Danny Ollie because he had a friend called Daniel and a friend called Ollie. And then I had a book that was Ollie, Nollie, Elephant. So I was Danny Ollie, Nollie, Elephant. And as quite a chunky little child, we got rid of the Danny Ollie and I just became Nollie Elephant because that was more appropriate for my size, I think. And then, when I was younger, I moved to New Zealand. So around the age of 4.5, 5. And so when my mum took me to primary school, she said, look, this is Danielle, but we call her Nollie. And they were like, yeah, we love it. And that's kind of how it stuck. So yeah, it's quite strange when people call me Danielle. I feel like I've done something wrong.
Well, when I saw, so I'd met you and then I saw your real name, I'm like, oh no, that's not the same person. Oh no, it is actually, so but it's interesting. You've had the name for a long time. Sometimes people get nicknames during their sporting career or their friends give it to them, but you had it right from the start. So let's go back to New Zealand. Tell us how that move came about and what impact that had on your life.
So my mum's partner at the time, my parents were divorced when I was quite young, and then my mum's partner at the time had a job over in New Zealand, and so we were kind of agreed. My parents agreed that she would take my 2 older brothers and I over to live in Palmerston North of all places, which isn't the most exotic for anyone that's lived in New Zealand. But he was based at Massey University in the Agriculture Research Department. So we were supposed to go for 1 year. We stayed for 4. Absolutely loved it. It's a completely different way of life over there, as we all know. And I'd already started playing a little bit of rugby because I wouldn't be left behind up at the local rugby club when my brothers went up. But I suppose that was where I got my real first taste of playing and smashing into the young boys and running around with bare feet, which was awesome. But after 4 years, my mum decided that actually it was really important that we came home and be with my dad and my grandparents. So we came back to England, and that's kind of where I carried on playing and went back to school and slowly lost my Kiwi accent.
I was going to say, so you picked up rugby there for the first time. Talk us about playing rugby in the back garden with your brothers as well, because I love that story.
So we need to probably dig out some VHS videos that we sent back to my dad of my brothers and I playing in the garden. To be honest, anyone that's watched me play through my career will know that my footwork and my evasion is probably one of my strongest attributes, and that is honestly down to the fact that my brothers, who were 2 and 4 years older than me, would smash me, and I had to come up with a way to avoid them. It became quite a good skill that stuck with me, but I absolutely loved it. And I think we would play every sport going, anything possible, but being competitive and having two boys, and actually my mum would regularly say to them, she is just little sister, maybe go a little bit easy on her. And their answer was, well, if she wants to play, she's got to be good enough. And I don't know, maybe in a way that's kind of stayed with me. And they didn't see me as any different for my age or the fact that I was a girl. They just wanted people that were good enough to play. And I think, that's something quite a strong mantra. They definitely didn't mean it and weren't intelligent enough to know what they were doing. They just wanted to play a good game of rugby, I think.
Well, I had an older sister, 4 years older, and not really the biggest sister, but super athletic. So I actually grew up evading her as well, because she was always faster and stronger than me and quite vicious. And I grew up just following her and every sports team she had. That she played, and I've since gone on to coach women for about 20 years myself, and respecting it. So I got beat up by my older sister.
I remember one game we were down. I think we were waiting for parents to finish conversations or whatever, so we decided to have this massive game of takedown bulldog, and it was with my brother's age group that was 4 years older. So some of them knew me, but not quite, because we weren't at the same school. And I was like, well, I'll join in. And they were kind of looking at me and looking at my brother. And my brother was like, it's absolutely fine, don't worry. Anyway, he was in the middle, and the first person he smashed was me. And they were like, oh my God, okay. But then the next person I smashed was the middle brother. And so they were like, your family are crazy, but they loved it. So we just got stuck in. So there was no holds barred.
You grew up to look after yourself. So tell us about your father, Jim. He played over 400 impressive matches for Bath. And how many years was that, his entire career?
I'm not actually sure, and he will probably, he'll be disappointed that I don't know. I think it was around 15 years, which is the same length as my career. It was pretty impressive, especially back in the day. And he captained them during the 70s when, that was a generation of Bath players that were really pretty creative and inventive with what they wanted to do. I didn't quite realise how well respected he was up at the club. We went back for the first time, I think 3 or 4 years ago, since he actually left in the early 80s, and chatting with his teammates, they were saying what type of player he was, and that he was a running fullback, and he didn't kick the ball, which maybe is why I ended up like I did. But it was really nice to know not just the stuff that he did on the field, but also off the field with bringing in a shop and starting to sell kit for the first time that wasn't really heard of, and also just the banter about the tour stories and stuff is always quite good to know.
That's awesome. Nice to have somebody like that to look up to as you come up. What other sports did you play growing up?
To be honest, anything. I loved all sports. The ones that I kind of spent a bit more time competing and were in clubs for were gymnastics, trampolining. I did a lot of netball when I came back to the UK, and athletics. But I was the typical sports kid at school, and anything that they needed someone in a team for, I would normally be put on. Unfortunately, hockey, my mum was always a bit disappointed actually that I didn't do hockey, because that was her sport. But the only place I could really find for me was in goal, because I'd get really frustrated that someone would be able to just nip past me with the stick skills. So I just want to whack him with my stick. So they decided to put me in goal, and I could use my aggression to take people out that way.
Yeah, right. That's why rugby's definitely suited to you. So at a young age, though, at 15, you made the England Senior Rugby Academy. What was that pathway like? How did you get seen? And surely you were by far the youngest on that squad.
It was all a bit crazy. So I played with the boys until I was 12, but there was no girls rugby. And actually at that point, I didn't even know that England women had a team. I went in and got involved with all the other sports, but nothing was really the same as rugby. So I managed to convince, you guys know how difficult it is to create a rugby team, because there's a hell of a lot of people that you need. And I didn't have loads of girl mates, because most of my mates were the rugby boys. So had to try and convince quite a few girls to come and play. But we managed it. And for one season, we had a home and away game against a team near Bristol, which was the big city close to my little town. And on the back of that was when I found out about Southwest Girls. And I remember my mum waking me up the morning of the trials and saying, you haven't played properly for a long time, just see how you get on, don't put too much pressure on yourself. And I was like, and I sat in the changing rooms and I didn't know anybody, and there was all these groups of girls, and I was a bit kind of intimidated by it. And I sat next to this other girl who was really tall, and I was like, oh God, everyone's massive, and I don't know anyone. Anyway, we started chatting, and I just said, no, I don't know anyone. And we kind of agreed. We were like, oh, well, should we be mates then? Because no one else likes us or knows us. And she's still one of my best mates to this day. And yeah, on the back of that, we did all these drills. I didn't have a clue about any of them. But as soon as we played the game, I just kind of I could show what I was about as a player. And on the back of that, I did England. There was a summer camp with England, and I did the under-16s group. They thought that I was pretty good, so I played a game with the under-16s, and they moved me straight to the under-18s game. And I was like, it's really hot, I'm knackered. They're like, no, it's fine. And then my parents got a call and said, look, we're starting up the first ever England Senior Academy, and we'd love Nollie to be involved. And we understand, because at the time I couldn't do contact with seniors or anything, so it was all a bit confusing. But went along, and that was kind of the start of the journey. And yeah, an email was sent round when I was 16 saying how happy they were, but it was a bit kind of controversial that actually it was just about rugby rather than anything else.
So let's go to this remarkable time in your life. Your Test debut for England occurred in 2003. You were 18 years young, at the time the youngest ever woman to represent their country. Take us back to that day and walk us through your emotions and your mindset.
Yeah, it was pretty mad. So it was the last game of the Six Nations, and actually it clashed with the Hong Kong Sevens. So I was playing scrum half at the time, and the scrum half, Joe Yap, had been selected to go over and represent England in Hong Kong. So I was called up as third choice. I was called up into the seniors, it was pretty mad. I remember actually going back to my name, they read my name out in shirt presentation, and one of the girls turned around and was like, who's that? Because they'd only ever known me as Nollie, so they were just like, who's Danielle? And the girls were amazing. I was so lucky to be brought up in the game with just complete legends of women's rugby that managed full-time jobs alongside playing, were incredible at what they did. And they didn't make it easy for me. They made sure that I was challenged, but at the same time supported me, and they just allowed me to go and play. 7 minutes, that was what I got. Managed to set up a little try with a Gregan, and weirdly was embarrassingly told him when I first met him that was that he had an influence on my first cap. But I think to be able to experience something like that so young, you don't really appreciate it. It's all a bit mad. It was in the March before my A-level exams, and I think the only problem is when I came back, it just reset me in the wrong way. I think I was adamant that I was going to uni, but that that will be, academics were fine. I was concentrating on my rugby, and then didn't do very well in my academic studies, and had the summer trying to decide what uni to go to because I didn't get the grades to the one I wanted to. So quite quickly after having the amazing hype of doing what I did, I had a bit of a low point in my career. And actually that September was the new trials, and they'd made such a fuss of me being the youngest cap player and all that type of thing. It was kind of like, right, this is awesome, I'm amazing and I'm going to hit the ground running. And I got a phone call from the scary head coach at the time, Jeff Richards, who was an Aussie, and he said, I'm not picking you this year. And on the back of getting a first cap and being this star, he basically said, because it's scrum half, he said, look, your bread and butter is your passing, and that's not good enough at the moment. You can have all the stardust that you want, but I need this. And I think it's interesting because people often think that journeys, and I work with a lot of young people now, and young players, and the realization, and I was gutted, I went through all the emotions of frustration and anger, and I'll prove you wrong, and then I don't want to do it anymore. And but actually it was the best thing that ever happened to me, and it was the last time that anyone dropped me for not doing my basics. So it was a good lesson to learn quite young. That's
an amazing story. And we, doing some research on your career, you won't read about that. You know what I mean? And so that's really fascinating to hear that.
Well, that's a big reason why we've Dallen and I have connected. It's to tell these stories, because there's so many young athletes that we work with, or even older athletes. I didn't debut till I was 26 after 7 years of getting cut. I sing that song a lot, but it's often those setbacks that actually make us stronger, or make or break you, right? And it's not always, the coach doesn't always tell you what you want to hear, but sometimes you need to hear it. So another piece that's super interesting for me is just listening to your story as well. We're really featuring the legendary coaches and legendary athletes, both current and of the past. And there's a common thread between you different legends, is a diverse multi-sport background, which is something that I'm a big advocate for, and debuting quite young. Good talent ID officers out there that definitely did their job in the UK. But your career spanned over 15 years, 82 brilliant caps for England. How has the international game changed over that period for you?
God, I don't even know where to start, to be honest. I think everything about the women's game has changed, apart from one thing, I think, in particular from England. As I say, I was really super fortunate to have amazing role models that set an incredible standard on and off the field for me. And, they were pushing themselves and challenging themselves as athletes as much as rugby players right from the start of my career within England. And I was really fortunate to have that mentality drilled into me, that that's what it was to be a Red Rose. But in terms of the game, my mum still has check stubs from when she used to pay for me to go to play and to go to training camps. I still managed to keep one item. It's annoying my mum because it's blocking up all of her house, but I kept one or two pieces of kit from every year. And yeah, going from men's shirts that weren't even with obviously they're not right size, but I had one of my first shirts had the sleeves cut off and the 9 was stitched on, and it was falling off, and it'd gone through however many players to get to me, to then we were sponsored by Gilbert, and I think I had a 48-inch chest shirt that obviously wasn't the most fitting. So yeah, to all of the setup around the players now, the stadiums they play in, the TV audiences, the respect that the players have and the women's game has, I think is significantly changed, and the attitude towards the game. And I don't think, as I say, I think England has always been at the forefront of the attitude we've had as players. We might not have been professional with being paid, but we've been professional in our attitude. But it's really cool now that we're getting the recognition and the acknowledgement, and also the support. I still think that there's a massive way to go, and I'm kind of supporting that in different ways. And I think Sevens probably, which is where our friendship was born, Dallen, I think is probably leading the way with how they are responding to the women's game.
And how about that next wave of young girls and young women across the world that are picking up a ball at just a younger age, and there's just so many different layers now across the world. The women's game and girls' game has just exploded. How do you feel about being a part of laying out that platform for this current generation and generations to come?
I love it. I think, I was one of the only girls in my town. There was a couple of girls that were interested in it, but I was only one really that took it seriously. I think the biggest thing isn't even the elite side. I just love the fact that girls have got the opportunity to do it. Rugby is such an amazing sport. It's so special with what it offers somebody's life. And that sounds a bit deep, but I genuinely believe it's something that can empower you and create friendships, across the world. It can give you the confidence, the values that you have as a player. So I think that the fact it's becoming more normal for young girls to try the sport and come into it. I actually met some women the other day in their mid-30s that were trying the game for the first time. They were like, I can't believe we didn't try it before, but we love it. I think is super cool. I think the other side of it is that there's more opportunities for women in the game. So not just the players, but there are now full-time referees, there are and officials, there are full-time coaches, there are the medical side, the analyst side, the nutrition, everything that comes with elite sport. Now there are so many more opportunities for women, and then you've got the other bit, which is the bit that we all love doing, which is the talking, so the media side. And the more we can inspire girls, I think, with all of those roles, I think is just as important as the playing as well.
It's such an international game. When I came to America, I just came with a pair of rugby boots, and I really had 30 friends joining a club. And because of the game, they accepted you in, and the rest is history. So you absolutely agree. So Nollie, let's go Rugby World Cups. You're in a rare group. You've featured in 4 of them. Silver medals for England in 2006, 2010, and 2017, and champions in 2014. Can you run through some of the highs and lows about competing at that ultimate event in rugby?
There's plenty of lows as much as highs, that's for sure. I don't know, it's amazing actually, because it's not until you finish your career you really actually focus on you even think about the fact that you've done what you've done, because even when we won the World Cup in 2014, it was amazing. Had a big party obviously afterwards, but within a week we're then focusing, we were given professional contracts for the first time. We went into sevens, and then we kind of accelerated through. But I think particularly in the tournaments, in 2006 when we were over in Canada, made the final, and we were beaten by a better team on the day in the final, and I remember being heartbroken at 21 years old and being like, what, in 4 years I've got this, and we can go one better. To have the privilege of playing in a home World Cup was absolutely awesome, but in the November before the World Cup, unfortunately I was taken out in the club game by myself. I sidestepped, my ACL went, and so within 8.5 months of the World Cup, I didn't think that I was going to make it back. So probably one of the many injuries that I came back from, but the first one that I learned a lot about myself was that injury, and I managed to come back and play. And in that tournament, I was nominated for World Player of the Year. So I think that whole experience of going through the trauma of the injury and the rehab, and having to get myself mentally, into a place where I could perform at a World Cup was really hard. And I remember being in a training session and having to pull myself out because I was in floods of tears, and because I just couldn't get my head around the fact that I wasn't going to get injured. And then the following game, I got player of the match. I'd scored 2 tries, actually against America. And then again, it crushed me, and everyone was like, "This is crazy. You're playing such good rugby." But I was like, "This is going too well. It has to end." And I think at 25 and playing, so you've got this massive, massive high and amazing opportunity to be playing in a home World Cup. But I was battling all of these mental challenges around an injury that, although physically I was back playing, and I mentally I hadn't caught up with myself. And I remember having a conversation with the head coach at the time, Gary Street, and him saying that, it's brilliant for us to know that we can get a player back in 8 months fitter, faster, stronger than they were pre-ACL reconstruction. And I was like, but you didn't have me. And he was like, what? And I was like, I might, my body might have been there, but my mind was probably 4 or 5 months behind me. And so I think that was a real learning curve for me, but also the attitude and the application that I put to my rehab, I think definitely helped with the following 5 reconstruction surgeries that I had over the years. And then, winning in 2014 was just so special. It was alongside players that had so much heartache in losing in 2006 and 2010, and having a lot of the women that I had played alongside through my early part of the career in the stadium. Sue Day was actually commentating, who I'd played and been my captain in sevens. So yeah, that was really, really special. And then just to finish in 2017, I nearly retired after the 2016 Olympics. I'd battled through a really pretty brutal knee injury and didn't feel like I was playing very well, and wasn't really enjoying myself. But had a weight session with Rocky Clark, and she convinced me on the bench press that actually I should carry on. And to go to my 4th World Cup was pretty special, having gone through what I did. But unfortunately, I started in all 3 pool games. I was playing some pretty good rugby. I was on pretty good form. In the semi-final against France, 25 minutes in, once I'd got that start, I was kind of like, well, I'm going to be the first England player to start in 4 World Cup finals, played in an Olympic Games. 25 minutes in against France, I get hit on the jaw and I get concussed. And as an instant removal. And so because the women's game is a turnaround of 4 days, I had to be told in the change rooms. I hadn't realised, and I had to be told in the change rooms when all of the girls were in celebrating, knowing that some of them were going to their first ever World Cup final, some of them were going to their 4th, that I wouldn't be playing. So I think it was a really tough moment. I think I wouldn't wish that one on anybody, but it actually allowed me to have probably my most amazing season with England, which was the year after. I carried on playing because I was like, there's no way I'm retiring on a silver medal and an HIA. And I'd gone to Wasps. I was playing my rugby there and I loved it. And I had the support of Giselle Mather, the director of rugby, and with the women around me, and some support from my family, because there was some challenging moments. I loved being back in an England shirt, and I retired on my own terms after the Six Nations, which was super special. It's kind of, I don't know, maybe I've sounded a bit negative, but there was lots of highs and lots of lows, but all of them provided me with an opportunity to learn and develop and kind of move forward. And to say, one of the lowest moments in my career actually created some of the best moments just before I retired. So, yeah, there you go.
and Nollie, I love though, as you said, because not many players do get to go out on their own. You have a long career like you have, 15 years. It's great that you didn't end on that note and you settle on your own terms and left the game on a high, because you've given so much to it. A quick side story. I didn't know this until I was doing a bit of research into all the games you've played. In 2014, when you scored in the final and you guys won and you lifted the trophy, my wife and I were on holiday in Greece, and we went to some bar and we had some drinks, and there you were on TV. Because I remember saying, "Oh yeah, England, that's carving up Canada." I was like, "Wow, that's amazing! That's a World Cup final." So yeah, that's a little moment in time. I actually remember where we were in that final that you won. So I think that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
So now this is another big question for you. World Cup, obviously, but what are your other all-time favorite 15s moments in an England jersey?
I don't know, like I've been really fortunate to do some pretty cool stuff. I think, to be honest, it's not just in the shirt, it's afterwards on the tours and stuff, the banter with the girls. I think that when I look back at my career, it's the players and the laughs that you have. Those are the bits that are actually the funniest, dropping the ball over the line at Murrayfield when no one was around me. Obviously at the time it didn't go down very well, but it's quite funny to look back on. But yeah, I think my last season, as I say, my last game was at the Ricoh Arena, and we were playing against Ireland. Unfortunately, we'd lost I'd never lost a Six Nations game until my penultimate against France away, and we lost one of the last plays of the game. And ironically, they'd scored. We actually managed to get the kickoff back. And anyone that knows me, well, you know me as a commentator and as a player and a coach, I hate people getting pushed into touch. Right? So to me, you've got to fight. You've got to fight and fight and fight. In that game, I was past the ball. I took the wrong step. I stepped off my right, which I should have actually stepped off my left. And the girl hit me, who was probably about 100 kilos, and I couldn't stay on the field. And so the last play of the game was actually me taking the ball off the field. So my only loss by 1 point. Yeah, but it was one of my most amazing memories of the game, because I remember standing on the field and we were playing down in Grenoble. It was 9 o'clock at night kickoff. The French are mad, and there was 17,500 fans, and they were there for us. And, for somebody that had lived through paying to play for my country, playing in front of, a couple of hundred people at Isha Rugby Club on a cold, muddy afternoon, in an England shirt, to actually playing in front of that many people with that atmosphere. Even though we lost, it was awesome. And then the following week we went to the Rico because my club team is Wasps. I managed to get my family into hospitality, so they were looked after pretty well. And at the end of the game, all the other family were actually on the other side of the field. And so I was doing some interviews. I waited for Sky, and I looked up, and very, very rarely did I have all of my family at a game, and they were all there. Both sets of parents, and my brothers and my partner, and they were just all having the best time. And they hadn't noticed that I was watching them. And I think I'd loved the game, and it was super cool to know that they were having a good time, having a beer as well. So, yeah, I think the memories of the rugby, I don't know, there's lots of those, but actually those are the things that probably stick with me and make me smile the most.
Oh, I love that, Nollie.
Switching gears into sevens, you also represented England in sevens. What tournament and what year did you debut in sevens for England?
I think about 1912. Honestly, interestingly, I'm so old that I actually got capped in sevens before my 15s senior cap. But I can tell you a fun story. They weren't the World Series then, and they weren't even capped. So I actually only officially have, I think, 15 or 16 sevens caps, even though my career spanned 15 years. My first official tournament was the Europeans. And at the time, obviously things have slightly changed now, but at the time England were a real powerhouse in Europe alongside France. So we took an under-19s team, and the rest were seniors. So I captained the girls, and I remember turning up, and it was all a bit bizarre. And one of the teams, I can't remember where they were from, had woken up our coach the night before the tournament, like at 1:00 in the morning, and they'd been traveling for like over a day in a minibus to get to the tournament to play. This is a country like Netherlands. I can't remember who, but it was crazy, right? So anyway, he'd gone to the coach's briefing and had come back and said, "Look, I've got some concerns, Nollie." And I was like, "Okay, what's happened? Is everything okay?" And he said, I think we might be playing in a smaller pitch. And I was like, "Oh, okay. Like, as in what? Like, is it a small ground? What's happening?" And he said, No. They've got concerns that the women can't play on a full-size rugby field. And I kind of laughed, and we were joking, like, ha ha ha, that can't be real. How can you make a rugby pitch smaller? You've got posts, all that type of thing. Anyway, so I was a bit like, all right. So in the morning, we had the squad photo in front of these kind of things, and we go to the pitch, and lo and behold, the pitch has been made smaller. So it's not just come in onto the fives, but they've also brought the pitch to the 22, which obviously was a little bit confusing, because I was like, well, how can you have a try line there, like the posts, that type of thing? And what we were stood in front of for our team photo was blow-up posts, and they were the blow-up posts that they were going to be using for my first ever international tournament. So in the space of, so I was 19, so 2004, I went from playing on a rugby field. I mean, the problem was we were so good as a group. There were girls like Heather Fisher, Claire Allen, Rachel Burford. We were, it was all of the future stars of England sevens and 15s. It just meant we didn't have to run as far and scored lots more tries. Absolutely ridiculous that in my career I went from playing in that, which was an international tournament, to then playing in Olympic Games.
I can't believe that. Is this an exclusive story? Because it sounds like I've never heard of that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sounds like a rookie rugby pitch.
Yeah, well, that's and that shows just where the women's game has gone and how far it's developed. And attitude, that was the decision was made by the governing bodies that were involved and the tournament organisers. That's what they thought of women's rugby, and I'd like to think we proved them wrong, and we did it all right. We won the tournament, and it was funny actually, because it was down in Limoges in France, and anyone that knows any history about Limoges, it's really famous for its pottery. Anyway, there was this massive trophy, and I was like, boom, we're going to get this huge, big, like, trophy. And then they gave this trophy to the team that we'd beat in the final, which was Italy. And I was like, well, are they like rolling out this like massive trophy? And then they presented me with this green plate. And I was like, you know, as a 19-year-old, I'm thinking, I don't want a plate. Like, why have you given me this? So I gave it to the coach and was like, oh, there you go. Anyway, lo and behold, this plate was actually worth like quite a lot of money, and I just kind of ditched it because I wanted the trophy.
You can't drink out of a plate, so you.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you made the transition to sevens from 15s, what was that like for you? And had you had much experience with sevens in your past?
Well, because I'd grown up with sevens from such a young age, you know, I was playing at 17, 18, 19. I actually jumped between both codes pretty much my whole career. It wasn't until the 2014. Oh, well, actually, even in 2014, I'd had another injury, actually, interestingly, that's not even a rugby injury. So, in 2013, I was balancing running a full-time rugby academy with full-time playing, and I'd done it for 3.5 years, and I'd had quite a few injuries. I tore my quad off my hip bone. I'd done all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and I knew that 2014 might be my last opportunity to get to a World Cup and also get a gold. So I decided to leave my career, which was pretty big considering I had a mortgage, but I was really lucky that my kind of family said, look, if you can't find the money, we'll step in somehow, we'll make it work. Anyway, I decided to get all of the girls back that I coached, which was awesome because the older girls, we had players like Alex Matthews, who is now one of England's 7 stars and world champion herself. She came back and met all of the younger girls, kind of looking at, you know, this current England player, which was super inspiring. However, the girls got me these amazing flowers and these presents, and it was a great evening. They went off into Gloucester. There was no chance I was going out for a night out with them, so I went home. Like any good florist ever told me, cut the bottoms off the flowers and put them in water. And I was like, okay. So I did that, put the scissors on the side, didn't realise they'd caught on my jumper, knocked the scissors onto the floor. But instead of going onto the floor, they actually stabbed into my foot. And in the process of stabbing in my foot, which was a 3mm gap, they ruptured my extensor tendon to my big toe and cut an artery. So there was blood everywhere and I couldn't move my toe. Ended up having to have emergency surgery a day later, and was spent my first 5 months of my build up to the 2014 World Cup rehabbing a foot injury that I'd got from leaving my job. So yeah, and actually the link back to sevens is that I actually decided, so when I managed to get back was in the middle of the Six Nations, and so they wanted to give me some game time that they could manage. So I went over to Atlanta and played in the sevens over there, and was ridiculously exhausted because I hadn't played much rugby, but it was brilliant. And then actually that was probably one of the few years I did both. So I did the sevens trip, and then I came back and played the last game in the Six Nations, and then that was our kind of running into the World Cup.
Wow. I mean, they say don't run with scissors, but I mean, that's the next level injury. Wow. I mean, to go with, as you said, everything else you endured, crazy stories. Well, you're probably going to talk about another injury in a little bit, but you rejoined the England team 2 years, the seven side, 2 years ahead of the Rio Olympic Games. But give our listeners a bit of a background into that journey and that build-up period. Okay,
so we'd never had professional contracts, and we knew that if we did well in the 2014 World Cup, that you know, hopefully the RFU would back us to have the support leading into Rio, because at the time Australia, I think America had got a little bit more backing, and some of the other nations were starting to have full-time sevens players, and to actually be able to compete, we had to become full-time. And so, yeah, the journey began in September 2014 after not being back that long from having a break from winning the World Cup and doing a little bit of partying. So yeah, there was a little bit of fat burning sessions to go on. I managed to give myself ulcers from eating so many crisps. So I was in slightly different shape to what I needed to be as a sevens player. But yeah, it was an awesome opportunity for the women's game to go professional. There was only, I think, 16 of us that were contracted. It was although it was a great opportunity to be training full time and to be immersed into it, it was a massive shock to the system for all of us. We'd never experienced anything like that before. And it was really tough. You know, we'd always had our own houses, our own lives, and then kind of gone to rugby at the weekends. And when you're thrown into your team all day, every day, it was very, very intense. And I think we probably didn't manage it that well to start off with as a team. We had to really work out what it meant to be professional and what it looked like and what it felt like. A lot of us were quite bored because I'd done 2 jobs for my whole life, you know, working full time and rugby full time. So yeah, it was a great experience, one that I learned from quite a lot. In particular, unfortunately, my injury rate struck again in February, and it was in Atlanta. I made a tackle, got up. Got up, went to look for the ball, and one of the players, Charlie Williams, legend from Australia, fell on my knee. Knee hit the floor, snapped my medial ligament. I didn't quite realise. I was like, oh, that's a bit sore. Carried on playing, and my knee was kind of moving in the wrong direction that it should do. Ended up having surgery. So the surgery went okay, but at the 8-week mark, when I was supposed to come out of my brace, I was told that I'd need surgery again, and it had gone quite horribly wrong. And so then spent the next year of my professional career rehabbing, probably 9 months of that on my own. I decided to withdraw myself from the squad and do a lot of my training in my own space. I spent 4 months. The British Olympic Association have a rehab unit, so I worked with a team there because it was a pretty grueling process. It took me 5 months to be able to walk down the stairs, and it was a lot of pain. And I probably hit my lowest point mentally because I'd never really dealt with my injuries before. Like I mentioned, you know, I always just kind of got back physically, so I'd always just assumed that mentally I'd be okay, and that now I was playing rugby, it was all good. So actually, you know, I was fine. And actually, I think at that point, I realised that it was going to be a long slog to get back, and I probably wouldn't come back the player that I was. So yeah, it was an interesting time being a professional player. I managed to get back and play. My first tournament back, ironically, was supposed to be Atlanta. It's a place that sits with me. But unfortunately, I did an invitational tournament over in Vegas and Vancouver. And that was my first trip back. And in the quarterfinals, went to jackal the ball, bang, top of someone's head, hit my cheek and broke my cheek in 3 places. So my return to rugby wasn't ideal, but it wasn't my knee, so I was okay. So I sat out because it was 2 weeks after my operation in Atlanta, but then they went on to Langford. It's a double header. And played my first tournament with a broken cheek in 3 places, but they said I was all right. That was then the run-in into Rio.
I was going to say, so that comeback, you were in the dream team, I believe, in that tournament, right?
Yeah.
You helped England win the tournament. So you speak about mental strength. I mean, can you, because that was just before the Olympic Games the same year, can you go through, how did you cope with your injuries during that period of time? And as you said, if it took so long to even walk, were there doubts in your head? You were like, I'm probably not going to make the Olympics?
Oh, 100%. You know, I'd written my email to retire. And I actually kept it, but I broke my phone, unfortunately, and it went with that. Maybe it was a good thing. But yeah, I remember it was a really tough, challenging time, and I genuinely I'd always promised myself that I'd had big injuries, and you know it was difficult, but if I could come back a better player in whatever sense that was, whether it was physically, mentally, technically, tactically, if I could always come back better at something, then I was good enough to be there, and I was enjoying myself, and those 3 things, I would carry on, and I would be good, and that would be my focus. I think probably the biggest thing and my biggest motivator, and you know, I know your relationship with your mum, Dallen. My mum had said on a couple of occasions that she couldn't wait to go to Rio and watch her daughter to become an Olympian, and I think that was probably what drove me in the moments when I was really really struggling to want to do it anymore. You know, I was rehabbing 5 times a day, 7 days a week. It wasn't glamorous, and it was painful, and it was lonely. But when you've got something like the Olympic Games to focus on, I don't think any athlete is going to turn down that opportunity. And I was really lucky to have some amazing people around me, and also people that recognised I wasn't okay and convinced me. And I will say convinced, because it wasn't encouraged. I was signposted towards getting some support mentally, and to see a psychologist away from sport, and it took some convincing, but actually was fantastic for me as a person and as a player, and probably the reason why I had the mental capacity and strength to carry on.
Were you involved, or were you injured during the 2015 Amsterdam Sevens when England qualified Great Britain into the Olympics?
Yeah, unfortunately I wasn't there, and actually it's awful because I was the only one that didn't travel, and I know it was against America, and 3 minutes towards the end of the game I was sat on the motorway, and I remember it so clearly. I remember I was in the passenger seat and I was watching it on my phone, and it was boiling hot over here, and we were sat in a traffic jam, and I was like, oh my God. So I'm watching it, and it's going back and forth, and you know, the girls are just hammering each other, and anything against America was always savage. So I knew that they could score like on an instant, because they could score from their own try line, behind their own try line. They had the speed and the athleticism to do it. 3 minutes before the end of the game, my signal goes, and I'm sat in a traffic jam on the motorway, and there's nothing I can do about it. And so I didn't know. And I couldn't pick it up for about 10 minutes. We managed to crawl forward, and I was like hanging out the window with my phone, like trying to find out. And yeah, finally found out that we'd qualified, actually via a text message from the girls, just going mental. So yeah, it was a pretty stressful moment for me.
For me, no disrespect, but I was coaching the Mexican women's national team at the time, and it was the first time in my life I actually cheered for the U.S. because had they won, right, they would have pre-qualified for the Olympics, and we would have had to win our regionals because Canada had already pre-qualified, so they would have both been top 4. So we and having won the regionals the previous year to go to Hong Kong, we were favorites. So anyhow, the England breaks our heart, and we go to the Olympic qualifications in Carolina, and we go 5-0, and then I meet my old Canadian coach Rick Sudgett, who's coaching the Eagles at the time. We go head to head and have a good catch up before the game, and of course the USA put the boots to us, and then the US men put the boots to the Canadian men. So that was a rough day, but yeah, then ultimately that was a kickstart for us to build our 3-year run to qualify for the World Cup. But yeah, I remember that, watching every second of that game, and no, it was pretty epic.
And it was mad, wasn't it? Like it was kind of end to end. It was tries breaking out from here, there, and everywhere. And I think it was like a last minute breakout from Joe Watmore, maybe, that got it for England. And I think, for us, we didn't think we'd get to that point, and also Europe is such a strong region. There's just and this year the qualification, or last summer the qualification for Europe, is bonkers to think how England managed to actually go on and win that with the quality of and the level of the game that with France, Russia, and knocking Ireland out as well, Spain. So yeah, it was pretty mad. I'm sorry to hear that it wasn't a good ending for you, Robin.
All good. What was it like representing Great Britain and just the molding of those other nations for the first time for you?
So actually we had 3. So because we were full time with England, it was a slightly strange setup because Scotland and Wales weren't full time, and they weren't on the World Series. So for those girls, we had 2 Welsh players, Jazz and Larry, and we started with 2 Scottish players, Meg and Steph. Meg decided it wasn't quite for her. She's actually Megan Gaffney is one of the stars of the Scotland team now, and is probably going to be pushing for a spot in Tokyo, which is amazing. And The 3 of the girls stuck it out. They trained with us for a year. Unfortunately, they couldn't come onto the World Series, but they did do the invitational tournaments. They did Vegas and Vancouver, and a couple of other tournaments as well. And it ended up just being Jazz that joined. So we had 11 of English and 1 Welsh. Our speedster, Jazz Joyce. And, you know, I think it was just so special because at the time women's rugby wasn't even in the Commonwealth Games, so we didn't play any multi-sport events. We just did rugby, and rugby's cool and I love it, but actually it's its own bubble. And to be able to go to an event where there's athletes from all around the world, shapes and sizes, colours, like, you know, like the first person I bumped into on the way to the dining hall, which hosts up to 10,000 people, which is the size of my town at home, was a Mongolian wrestler. And I was like, in what world would I ever meet a Mongolian wrestler? And it sounds super cheesy, but actually one of the coolest things about all of it is that everyone is there. That, you know, they might not be the superstars that everybody knows with the Olympic Games, the crazy stories or the wonderful achievements, you know, the records that are being smashed. But actually everybody there, from an athletic perspective, is achieving a dream and doing something for their country. And there's countries that, you know, I've never even heard of, like all of the flags and stuff, like it's mad. So yeah, it was pretty special, and at the same time pretty hard because of the journey that I'd been on to get there.
Yeah, those multi-sport games, you barely remember the competition. It's all about the athletes' village and the people you meet. And did you get to take part in the opening or closing ceremonies at all?
Unfortunately not. So we played the Saturday, the opening ceremonies on the Friday night, and we played Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And anyone that was competing within 72 hours from Team GB weren't allowed to go. Probably one of the biggest things that I not regret missing, because obviously we weren't given the opportunity to do it, but I would have loved to do. But one thing we were allowed to do, we were quite high up and we were on I think the 14th floor of our block, and ours was just Team GB. And so we decided that instead, all the way up through the athlete village, because we were up right at the top, there was the road with all the flags, and there was all of these buses, the yellow school buses, ready to pick up all of the athletes. But walking through the village was all of the different countries in their dress. So we got to see everybody and kind of have a pre-show glimpse at everyone and the buzz, and just feeling it and watching it. You know, it's kind of, I don't know, maybe like sitting on a balcony watching people go into nightclubs in Greece. I don't know.
Well, switching gears, what did you study in Cardiff, and what was it like living in Wales for you?
So I studied leisure and sport management, and which is basically a business management degree. Decided to just do something that I enjoyed, and yeah, as a city, Cardiff is epic. It's a really, really cool place, and I'm super stoked that I chose it, because, you know, it had such a great feel. And if there were more opportunities from a work perspective, I would love to live back there. And I stayed on for a few more years. So yeah, it was good. It was pretty challenging balancing a degree alongside rugby, but they were pretty supportive in terms of the tours that I needed to go on, and I just had to try and be a little bit more organised with my time when assignments needed to be done.
Yeah, the Welsh, they do love their rugby. I'll say that, you know, for sure. So let's fast forward to today's age. You and I have spent a fair amount of time on the Sevens World Series recently. You have a very tough job as a HSBC ambassador. Every time I see you in the VIP box, you're with Brian O'Driscoll, George Gregan, and you also put the biggest tackle I've ever seen on Brian Habana. So two things for us. Can you tell us what role you have to fulfill as an ambassador, and about that tackle on a banner? And the one I'm talking about is in Cape Town.
Okay, I was going to say, because I've done a couple on him. You know, this year I became the first ever female global ambassador with HSBC, and it's an absolute privilege. You know, yeah, we get to do some really cool stuff at the stadiums. We take guests around, but in behind the scenes, we come up to commentary, get to meet some pretty cool people in the commentary box, and you know, it's brilliant because you also get to chat with the players and, you know, live the exciting side of the stadium and feel the atmosphere in a totally different way. But I think some of the other side of the role that we do is what people don't necessarily know as much about, and that's in the build up to the tournaments. HSBC sponsor a lot of grassroots rugby, so there's the Rookie Rugby in Canada, and they launched Rugby Counts this year over in Vancouver, another program. In Dubai they support there's a program for local Emirati schools, so we went and did some coaching, and also something that I never thought I would do with Brian Abana, but they've written a book about 3 princesses that actually don't need the princes to save them, they save themselves, and Brian and I read the book to a group of Emirati asylum children that actually go into HSBC Tower once a week to learn to read and to learn to read English as well. So yeah, there's so many other things as part of the ambassador thing that I love doing, and I also get to do stuff like smash Brian into a pool just because he was talking rubbish and he needed to shut up.
Well, we're going to have to put the photos on social media when we do, but for the listeners out there, the Cape Town Stadium, 50,000 fans packed, and there was a small swimming pool on the side of the field that was, VIP guests got to go in, and there's a great footage of Brian saluting the crowd, standing up, and he didn't see Nollie come out of nowhere and just absolutely smoke him into the pool. It was brilliant. Now, listen, I actually was thinking back, the first time we actually met was actually in Los Angeles, and you were doing work with the Laureus Foundation. And so, again, it was Brian Abana was there, but Sean Fitzpatrick from New Zealand was there as well. And I have to tell this quick story because I think it's quite a classic. So there I am. I'm running a flag rugby program in Los Angeles called Play Rugby USA, which uses rugby as a vehicle for social change, and a wonderful organization. And Laureus do some brilliant work in that field. And so you guys came to visit us. We had a group of 9 and 10-year-olds playing flag rugby. First time these kids are touching a rugby ball. They're not sure what's going on, but they're having a blast. Nollie's joining in. Brian Abana's joining in. It's great times. Sean Fitzpatrick, who, by the way, me as a youngster watching him on the field, I will never forget when, and he was a great captain, obviously, for the All Blacks, but somebody went near him and he just pulled a Hollywood and fell down and pretend somebody had punched him, and the referee was like, oh, and there were no TV match officials, so they were like, oh, penalty against the Springboks because Sean Fitzpatrick got punched, but he didn't, right? So that was in my mind. Anyway, he gets the ball during this flag game, and he fends off this 9-year-old kid. It's flag, by the way, you can only pull the flag, fends off this kid to the face. The kid falls to the ground, is crying because that's never happened. And so Nollie runs over, we all run over to check to see if the kid's okay. And Sean gets up and he goes, oh no, they got to harden up, these kids, but I'll never forget that moment. That was the first experience. So touch on your work with Laureus. Obviously you don't do that,
Yeah, it was interesting, and I was with the really little ones who were super excited, and I unfortunately didn't get to witness it firsthand, but I don't know, maybe it's a lesson he felt. I don't know, I'm not quite sure. But Laureus is actually it's a global charity that was set up by Nelson Mandela, and using sport for change and sport for good, and it's fantastic, the work that they do. It's so inspiring, and I was really fortunate to combine coming to LA before the World Cup was held in San Francisco, and to see one of the programs, like you say, Dallen, the Play Rugby USA, and with young people that aren't necessarily even not engaged with sport, but just engaged in life, and finding a motivation and positive role models. And I think anybody that plays sport knows the values and the role it can play in your life, but if you haven't had that opportunity or motivation or inspiration to go and try it, then actually how would you ever know? And Laureus funds programs that use sport for social change as well. There's some amazing programs in South Africa, and I've actually been on a couple in the UK. One of them, the Wave Project, uses surfing as a mental health therapy, and the young girl that I worked with had social anxiety and was mute because of it. And you kind of think, but yet she's out in the water, she's smiling, she's laughing, and we made up a handshake, and afterwards I spoke to her mum and I gave her this handshake, and we were doing all of this, and her mum started crying, and I was like, oh my God, like I'm so sorry. And she was like, no. And anyway, I grabbed her and I said, look, is everything okay? And she said, my daughter would not communicate at all. No verbal, obviously, but no physical communication, and would really struggle with eye contact. But yet she has just stood there, looked you in the eye, smiling, and done physical handshake with you. And she's like, this is what the program has done for her. And I just think, you know, it brought a tear to my eye, because actually that's how important, how amazing sport can be. And so I'm like super passionate about the work that Laureus does, because it's just engaging with so many different people. And I also get to meet people like you, Dallen, who are the wonderful people delivering these programs.
You're so sweet. I'll pay you later for that. But yeah, absolutely. I love what you do. And that's why when I first met you, I was like, wow, this is not only a person that's done so well on the field, but really devoting your time and energy into, bringing that next wave of young kids through. Brilliant.
So Nollie, just a question for you. I work with a lot of athletes and of all ages and a lot of little ones, and I try and inspire them as well. And having someone like you on is very special for us, and definitely gonna make sure those aspiring athletes and young kids get to listen to you. But if you could go back and share a few words of advice to a 10-year-old Nollie with stars in her eyes, what would you say to her, and what would you say to all those young kids out there that have a dream?
Stop picking on your brothers. No. I think, to be honest, just keep taking every opportunity with both hands. And, when people offer you help, don't be afraid to take it and ask for it. Because I think too many times we become stubborn in wanting to do everything and achieve everything by ourselves. But yet my best achievements have always been alongside people, and the friends that I've made have made all of my memories about rugby and my rugby career worth it. So yeah, that's probably what I would probably suggest. And don't be afraid if you do take knocks, then just get back up, because with the right advice, you can get back out there.
Thank you. And what values do you live your life by day to day, and what are the ones you focus on when working with kids?
I think one of the most important things is being honest. I think not just to other people, but also to yourself. And, I also believe that there is a real power and infection of personality and energy. And actually, when I'm working with young people, I talk about, or with anybody actually, because adults need to hear it, about 5 meters of energy. And actually, if you walk into a room, it's up to you whether you give that the 5 meters of energy as a positive and have a positive influence on people. And then the other side is that that a lot of things are choice. And in the morning you wake up, and when you go downstairs, it's your choice to smile and say hi to people, give someone a high five. And I think that just remembering that I think is quite important. And I suppose one thing I've learned from being stubborn and also needing to be convinced is that there's a huge value in looking after your mind, and we often forget it, in particular as athletes, because our focus is so much on what our bodies produce in terms of the physical attributes that you need to be any athlete from any sport, but actually it's all powered by your mind. And if you're in a good place, you're happy, you're feeling supported and you're confident, it's amazing what your body can actually then achieve. So yeah, I think being kind to yourself, and if you need the support and you're feeling low, surrounding yourself with people that are giving you that 5 meters of positive energy and not always expecting it from you. I think that would probably be something that I try and kind of encourage with young athletes and also other people.
I love that. 5 meters of positive energy. That's sensational.
You give like 50 meters.
I was going to say, I feel like the 5 meters is way too small. 5 meters is when I'm in a bad mood. It's got to be 10 meters or 15. On behalf of Robin and myself, we really want to thank you so much for your time. You're an inspiration, not only to us, obviously, but to so many people out there. And I love what you do with the young kids and even adults as well. Mental strength, so important. Nollie, you're an absolute delight and a pleasure to have on.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. It's really nice to catch up, guys.
Beautiful ball over the top. Yes, Seppo!
Thank you for listening, you sleek sensations.
If you haven't already, please subscribe to Rugby Hive podcast and catch us on all the socials at Rugby Hive.
We appreciate your support. Be safe out there, and we'll see you soon.
They've taken the lunch money from South Africa and are up by 17.